Financial Planner. Follow us on YouTube.
The Petrodollar Doomsday clock just ticked closer to midnight. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, yesterday there was a report coming out of the corporate media, and it came out last night, and today it looks like there's a little bit of confusion because Schumer, Pelosi, they had both had dinner with Donald Trump at the White House, and they were hammering out some deals, and according to a statement, Trump agreed to a deal on the DACA in exchange to border security, but no wall. Now, they're saying that, yes, we had a very productive meeting at the White House with the president, and basically they're saying that he's going to enshrine the protections of the DACA into law quickly and to work out a package of border security excluding the wall. And this was acceptable to both sides. Now, as soon as this came out, Trump tweeted, and the White House press secretary Sarah Sanders came out and said, no, this is not true whatsoever. We have never arrived to any agreement like this whatsoever, and this is completely fake, phony, and false. And Trump is out there saying, nope, we're going to build the wall, and what they said is not true. So we really don't know what is going on here. It looks like people are just out there making up things. People are denying it, and at this point, the wall doesn't really matter. All you need to have is security on the border to keep those individuals out. There's already proof of this because all those illegals that were coming in, guess what? They're not coming in anymore. It's a very simple thing. Just have the border security do their job, and guess what? They can keep most of them out, because you have to remember, under Obama, they were just coming over the border, no problem. As soon as they made it over the border, they put them on a bus and they shipped them off to a sanctuary city. If you don't do that, guess what? You can control what is happening. Now, we know that Putin and Merkel, they were talking about bringing in UN peacekeepers to Ukraine. Now, Washington, they're supporting this idea of placing UN peacekeepers in Ukraine to protect the OSCE. Now, what's very interesting about this is that the United States is not part of the Minsk II agreement. They're not a part of any of the negotiations whatsoever. And they do, and I'm talking about the cabal, they do have individuals, troops inside of Ukraine training the Ukrainian army. And we know that Graham, we know that McCain visited Ukraine, and they said this is the year of the offensive. We know this is them backing up war to get Crimea, to get the southeastern part of Ukraine. And we can see right now that Putin is pushing this very hard in this area. And we can see that things are really starting to die down in Ukraine. And we see things are heating up in North Korea. Now, what's very interesting about North Korea is that the U.S. is continually placing sanctions on North Korea. And we know just recently there were more sanctions placed on North Korea. Now, this is dangerous because, for example, what is the goal of the sanctions? They have never really been explained of how the sanctions are going to force North Korea to stop their missile program, how it's going to stop their nuclear program. Because think about this for a second. Since October 9th, 2006, when North Korea had their first nuclear test, there have been 8 UN Security Council resolutions imposing sanctions on North Korea. And the U.S. has imposed unilateral sanctions of its own. Has this stopped North Korea from testing nuclear weapons? No. Has it stopped North Korea from testing their missile systems? No. So the question is, what are the sanctions supposed to do? Because as we can see with Cuba, as we can see with Iran, as we can see with Syria, they do nothing except hurt the people of the country. And we know that the sanctions, well, they will reduce North Korea's economic growth and inflict greater hardship on its people. But again, this is not going to stop the government of North Korea from testing their equipment, testing their nuclear equipment, testing their missiles. Just like Cuba, they always find a way around the sanctions. They don't work like they used to. Actually, I don't even think they ever worked. But today, there's so many other options. They can use Bitcoin. They can deal in other currencies. They can trade their drugs for currency. And this is what countries have been doing now. They're completely going around the dollar, bypassing everything. Now, we talk about many countries where they're moving away from the dollar. We're talking about China, Russia, Iran, Syria, South Korea, you name it. Many countries are doing this. Now, Venezuela, they're under a lot of pressure from the United States. The United States wants regime change. They want to capture Venezuela, have a regime. They want regime change. They want a puppet government in there. And they want to place the dollar on their natural resources, which is oil. And Venezuela recently came out and said, listen, we are thinking about moving away from the dollar and dealing in other currencies. Now, Venezuelan President Maduro has said this, and he's following through. And right now what they're doing is they're telling oil traders that it will no longer receive or send payments in dollars. Oil traders who export Venezuelan crude or import oil products into the country have begun converting their invoices to euros. So what happens if Europe also sanctions Venezuela? Well, they'll probably turn to rubles or the yuan or maybe even gold, because they don't need to use a specific currency. The only reason countries are using the dollar is because the United States uses its armed forces, sanctions, to pressure countries to do this. Now, Libya wanted to sell their oil not using the dollar. They were invaded. Iraq wanted to do the same. Lebanon wanted to do the same. Syria didn't want to build a pipeline. And look what happened. Now, Venezuela, they're looking to basically sell their oil not using the dollar. Now, this is at the same time China and Russia unveiled their latest oil yuan gold triad at the latest BRICS conference, where they're basically having these future contracts with the yuan. So this is all happening at the same exact time. And we could see at this point that the United States, the cabal, who's been backing this entire system, the petrodollar system, well, it is falling apart right in front of them. The doomsday clock for the petrodollar has just moved closer to midnight right now, and it's getting worse and worse. And we can see out in the Middle East is basically falling into the hands of China and Russia, and these countries are taking back their control, and they're going to start selling their natural resources, not using the dollar, because we see already, and we mentioned this before, the Iraqi parliament, well, they decided and they voted that the Kurdish people, well, they're not going to have a referendum. They also decided to remove the Kurdish governor of Kirkuk, and they're saying, listen, this whole independent Kurdistan, not happening. If it's not happening in Iraq, it's not happening in Syria. And that means that basically the United States is going to have to eventually remove its forces from these areas, because there's no Islamic State, there's no Al-Qaeda, there's no moderate rebels, and the leaders of these countries have taken back their country. Now, what's very interesting about all of this is that the U.S. Senate has voted 61 to 36 to kill the amendment proposed by Senator Rand Paul that would have prevented endless war in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, he wanted to get rid of the 2001 authorization for use of military force, but it looks like it was shot down. And John McCain came out and said the following: the Senate can't repeal the AUMF without replacing it with a new authorization. Because if we repeal this, we would have to wind down U.S. forces in all of these areas. Yes, that is the point. It's to bring back all of the forces back to the United States, or bring them out of those countries where they don't need to be. The 2001 authorization doesn't allow the United States to stay in these countries for 8, 9, 10 years. It's ridiculous. It's time to leave. The Middle East has fallen right now, and we can see that there's nothing they can do. Now, they're still trying to do things. They wanted to get into Iran, and remember how the cabal works. They keep pushing forward until the very end, until they can't do it anymore. So they've just placed sanctions on Iran, and it looks like they've taken 7 Iranian individuals because they have participated in cyber attacks against the United States, and they're saying they're part of the ballistic missile program in Iran, and they decided to sanction them. Again, it's not going to work. And we can see right now all they have to do is turn towards China and Russia, deal in their country, deal in their payment system, and it's meaningless. This is why China and Russia are starting to stand up to the bully. And the bully is the cabal, the United States. And they're saying, no more. We're not going to do this. Now, Russia, they've deployed their most advanced jet to Syria, the MiG-29. Now, this is the most advanced version of the jet. It can strike air, ground, or sea-based targets with precision missiles. It's said to have a maximum range of about 1,800 kilometers and be equipped with advanced weapons controls, avionics, cockpit displays, and the jet's capability allow it to be used as an interceptor fighter or reconnaissance plane, and it can do many other things. So we can see right now they're bringing in heavy advanced equipment into this area because they realize it's time to clean out the rest of these paid mercenaries. It's time to get rid of the moderate rebels, and it will be time to get rid of the United States and the coalition forces. Now, the Islamic State is out there, and they're saying they're not going to negotiate any type of evacuation, any type of surrender. They will fight to the death. And the problem is, they will be fighting to the death because they're surrounded in Syria. They have no escape route right now. They have no supplies coming in. And Russia and Syria and Iran, they are bombarding them, and they only have 15% of the country left. And what that means is time is ticking down. The whole thing is falling apart. And once Syria and Russia say, listen, there's no more terrorists in this country, we've gotten rid of them, well, everything comes to an end. The petrodollar at this point will be doomed because the rest of the countries where they'll be getting rid of their terrorist groups, they're going to take back full control. Now, we've been talking about this for quite a while, where the Middle East, these Middle Eastern countries, eventually what they were going to do is they're going to take back their countries. They were going to start trading, not using the dollar, just like Venezuela is doing right now, which means none of these countries around the world will need to hold treasury bonds. They won't need to hold US dollars. And they're going to send that all back to the United States, which means that's going to hit the United States, and we're going to see hyperinflation. Now, we talked about this many, many years ago. Here we are today. It is all coming true. And right now, for the cabal, time is ticking down. This doesn't mean that they're not going to try to do something. It's been very quiet lately, and they're trying to push their agenda in North Korea. I think this is the only place they have left. Venezuela, I think at this point, is a lost cause unless they do something big, but I think they're going to try to focus in on North Korea and make it look like they did something. And I don't think North Korea is going to do anything. I think they're just taking the time to test their nuclear weapons, to test their missiles, to make sure they have some type of deterrent, to make sure that they don't have regime change in their country. And the only thing the United States, the cabal, has left is to sanction North Korea and to put pressure maybe on China, Russia, maybe. But that's about it. There is nothing else they can do. Now, the only thing that could happen at this point is that the cabal, they have some type of major event where they say North Korea cyber attacked the United States, or they fired some type of missile and the United States goes in there. Then they cyber attack the financial institutions here in the United States. Because we could see right now, they're trying to say that, yes, they've been hacking at Bitcoin. They've hacked into Sony Pictures, and they're part of this, huge organization of cyber attackers. They've been building this up for quite a while. And we see at this point that they might use this as their last-ditch attempt. But they are running out of time. The clock is ticking down. And what I mean by this is that when everything falls apart, when the Middle East falls and these countries take back control and they join ranks with Russia and China and the BRIC nations, well, it's game over. This is the end game. There's nothing left. And when they start saying, listen, we don't need the dollar anymore, just like they did all the way back in 2001, actually previous to that, guess what? There's nothing left here. The collapse will begin. And we don't know how this is going to happen, but we can see from other financial institutions, from financial pundits, from psychoanalysts, they're saying that this is coming up very, very soon. And this is why you need to be prepared, because it is happening very, very quickly now. Everything is accelerating. You can see the economy deteriorating right in front of your eye. Forget about the stock market. Forget about the GDP numbers. Go into the malls, go into the restaurants, go look. You'll see that the crowds are not there. Don't go into the 20 cities for housing and look at those housing markets. Look at everything else. You'll see that things are not as good as they say. Yes, there's going to be spots where restaurants are still popular, stores, but for the most part around the country, you're going to see a lot less people in these restaurants, in these stores. You're going to see a lot of stores close down, and you're not going to see other stores open up in these spots. You might see discount stores start to open because they're trying to capture the market because they don't know what to do at this point. And everything is not moving to online sales. That's only 10%. So as we go throughout the rest of this year, it's just going to accelerate. It's going to get worse. And as we enter 2018, if we make it that far, it's really going to pick up speed, and the whole thing is going to fall apart most likely in a split second. And then everything's just going to come down. And of course, at that point, they're going to have either some type of an event, or the central bank takes all the blame for this, which I don't think they're going to do. I think they're going to try to blame something else, a country, another group, or an entity, most likely North Korea at this point. I don't think they can blame Russia or China. They might try, but it looks like North Korea might be the scapegoat at this point in time. So we are heading to this period of time where things are accelerating. They're falling apart. As we watch this, as we look at the indicators, we can see we're heading down this path where there's no fixing it. There's nothing that can be done at this point except go through this crash, go through this transition, and then and we'll need to start to rebuild everything at that point. What will our country look like at that time? Well, I think the way of life will be a lot different. Will no longer be the reserve currency, and people are going to have to adjust. And this will take time.